Donald Trump's visit to the small coastal town was meant to be quick and quiet, a brief stop tucked between larger, louder events on his schedule. The town itself barely appeared on most maps, the kind of place people passed without noticing. A few wooden docks stretched into the water. Weather-worn boats rocked gently with the tide. This was a town built by hands, not headlines. As Trump stepped away from his motorcade, he paused. The smell of salt and sea drifted through the air. Gulls cried overhead, circling lazily. Fishing nets lay coiled along the docks like old memories, used, repaired, and used again. For a moment, the noise of politics felt far away. That's when an old fisherman stepped forward. He moved slowly, carefully, as if each step carried years of weight. His clothes were simple, faded, practical, and worn thin by time. His face was rough, carved by decades of sun, wind, and early mornings on the water. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't shouting for attention. He didn't ask for a photo or a favor. Instead, he carried something far more unexpected. A small metal pot. And two plain bowls. In a calm, steady voice, he spoke softly, almost respectfully. "Sir, it's not much," he said, "but would you share a meal with me?" The question hung in the air. Trump's aides froze. Security shifted uneasily. This wasn't on the schedule. This wasn't planned. No one knew how to react. But in that quiet moment, standing between the sea and a stranger's kindness, something was about to happen, something no one there would forget. And while the fisherman explained the meal was something he made every morning, fresh fish stew, cooked the same way his father had taught him, and his father before that. There were no written recipes, no measurements, just memory, instinct, and years of repetition. He pointed to the pot and smiled softly, saying it didn't need fancy spices or expensive ingredients. Just fish pulled from the water at dawn, potatoes cut by hand, onions slow-cooked until they softened, and time to let it all come together. Trump looked at the pot, then at the fisherman. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of water against the dock filled the silence. Even the gulls seemed to drift away. Finally, Trump nodded. They sat down on overturned wooden crates near the edge of the harbor. No tablecloth, no silverware, just two men, two bowls, and the quiet rhythm of the sea beside them. Steam rose gently from the stew, mixing with the salty air. The fisherman apologized again, almost out of habit. "It's simple food," he said, "but it's honest." Trump lifted the spoon and tasted it slowly, carefully, as if giving the moment the respect it deserved. He didn't rush. He didn't speak right away. Around them, people began to notice. A dock worker paused mid-step. Someone pulled out a phone but didn't get too close. Another whispered, unsure if they should even be watching. Yet somehow the moment felt strangely private, like the world had stepped back. As they ate, the fisherman spoke quietly. He talked about waking before sunrise when the town was still asleep, about storms that came without warning and ruined entire seasons, about hands cracked from cold water, about sons who loved the sea but left for factory jobs inland, searching for steadier pay and safer lives. Trump listened, not as a politician waiting for his turn to respond, but as a man hearing another man's story for the first time. Tea followed would travel far beyond that dock. Halfway through the meal, the fisherman hesitated, as if weighing whether he should speak. He wasn't used to asking questions of important people, and certainly not someone like this. Still, something about the quiet moment gave him courage. He cleared his throat gently and asked something no reporter ever had. "Sir," he said, his voice steady but humble, "with all you've eaten in the world, does this mean anything to you?" The question lingered in the air, heavier than the sea breeze. No microphones were thrust forward. No one rushed to fill the silence. Trump slowly put the bowl down. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out at the water, watching the boats rock gently against their lines. For a long second, it felt like time had slowed, as if the harbor itself was waiting. "This," he said at last, his voice calm and deliberate, "means more than most meals I've had." Those nearby leaned in, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "Because this wasn't prepared to impress me," Trump continued. It wasn't served in a grand room or surrounded by luxury. It wasn't about money, power, or image. He paused, then added, "It was offered with respect, and that's rare." The fisherman smiled, clearly caught off guard. He hadn't expected praise. He had only offered what he knew. Trump went on, gesturing lightly toward the docks, the boats, the town behind them. "You learn a lot about a country by how its people eat, how they work, and how they share with others," he said. "And this tells me something real." The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. There was no applause. But they were sincere. And in that quiet harbor, sincerity carried more weight than any speech ever could. By the time Trump stood up and shook the fisherman's hand, several videos had already been recorded. Within hours, clips flooded social media. Not edited speeches. Not rallies. Just a quiet moment by the sea. People shared it with captions like, "This wasn't politics. This is America. 2 lives, 1 table." Some praised Trump's response. Others focused on the fisherman's humility. Many said it reminded them of their parents or grandparents, people who worked hard and never asked for attention. The fisherman was interviewed later. When asked why he offered the meal, he simply said, "I didn't see a president, I saw a guest." That line alone spread like wildfire. News channels debated it. Commentators argued. Supporters and critics both shared the clip for different reasons. But everyone agreed on one thing. The moment felt real. Days later, the fisherman returned to his routine. Early mornings, quiet docks, the same stew. Trump moved on to his next event. But the story didn't fade. People replayed it because it touched something deeper than politics. It reminded them of a time when meals meant connection, not status, when offering food was an act of dignity. Trump later mentioned the encounter briefly, saying, "You can learn more from one honest meal than from 100 meetings." That sentence became a quote shared across platforms. In a world full of noise, outrage, and division, this moment stood out because it was small. No grand stage. No script. No agenda. Just a fisherman, a pot of stew, and a conversation that crossed worlds. And that's why it went viral, not because of who Trump was, but because of what the moment represented. Sometimes, the simplest meal tells the biggest story.